Okay, we are live.
We are.
And welcome to Mentionables Live. I'm Caleb Johnston, over here to my right.
Joel Furchess.
And right down here holding us both up.
Yeah, hold on. I'm Clinton Wilcox.
Hi, Clint.
Well,
Oh,
welcome, guys.
thank you.
I feel
Glad
welcome.
to have y'all with us. Good. You usually do. So tonight we'll take some Q&A. So if you have questions, go ahead. Feel free to throw those in chat. Hopefully everybody's able to see it and hear us okay. Maybe, maybe not.
I see we at least began having a viewer, so that's nice.
Mm-hmm. So we'll see. They've disappeared. Maybe it was on their end. All right. So tonight I figured we'd catch up just a little bit, then we'll see what comes in question-wise. Not like there's anything going on in the world we could discuss at this point. So, we'll see. If no questions, then who knows? But first, before we do that, I know that people have had a lot of stuff going on. So rather than do our spiel at the end of the show on where to find stuff, how about we do a quick go round here?
Sounds good.
Sure.
Clinton, you want to start us off?
Well, sure. I'm a full-time pro-life advocate, and I work for Life Training Institute. And I host a pro-life podcast called Pro-Life Thinking. You can find it on iTunes and blogtalkradio.com/pro-life-thinking. That's our audio-only portion. We also started up a YouTube channel called Pro-Life Thinking. And on that channel, we record a video portion and then extract the audio from that, put it on the podcast. But if you want to get the most out of the podcast, you'll want to listen to the audio-only portion and subscribe to our YouTube channel, because we have material that is specific to just or exclusive to each one. Sometimes we're not always able to record a video, so we'll just have the audio portion of it. And I do have some training videos I want to produce that won't go on the audio only podcast. So Pro-Life Thinking is a podcast that trains pro-life people into making the case for life effectively and persuasively. And so if you would like to, if you want to get the most out of that, you'll want to listen to the audio podcast and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And as for me personally, you can find me on Facebook. You can find me on MeWe, and I just started up a gab.com account, so you can find me there too. I'm not thinking I'm going to be on Twitter or Parler much longer, because the smaller number of characters you can use on those sites just are not very appealing to me, and they don't make for good conversations. So a lot of people just kind of troll too much on those kinds of sites. So so you can definitely catch me on Facebook, MeWe, and Gab, though.
Have you considered MySpace?
I used to have a MySpace back in the day.
Back in the day? You're still not on MySpace?
No.
Oh,
I wonder whatever happened to Tom.
Yeah, what did happen to that guy? I'm sure there's a YouTube video about the rise and fall of Tom or something. I should look that up.
Yeah, maybe a documentary or something.
Yeah, people ask that all the time, and I have failed to look it up thus far.
Oh.
I was friends with that guy one time.
Yeah, me
I
too.
don't like to brag.
Right, yeah. So that's primarily what I've got going on. We actually just recorded a video what's today, Saturday? So it would have been 2 days ago on Thursday. We just recorded a video about pro-life hypocrisy, whether or not pro-life people are hypocrites and whether or not it matters. And this next week, we're going to be interviewing Stacy Trasancos, who has a degree in biology and systematic theology. And we're going to talk about the various ways human embryos and fetuses are used in medical research. So, yeah, a lot of
very cool. That sounds very informative.
yeah, a lot of good informative stuff on the podcast, and so it's a great way to just get some free training on how to make the case for life in a way that's effective and persuasive to people listening.
Excellent. And I think we've updated the mentionables page with channels of everybody. So all the other YouTube channels should be linked under our channels on this page you're on watching this. So
yeah,
there's that if you want the quickest way to get there. How about you, Joel? I've seen you seem to have been busy the last couple of weeks. Tell us what you got going on.
Oh, boy. So what started as sort of a fun little bit of research for a podcast episode or an article I was going to write has been a wild ride. And I am this week starting my first semester at Liberty University. This is a switch from the Chicago School of Professional Psychology that I was at, where I was pursuing a PhD in applied behavioral analysis. And I switched to Liberty because Chicago School wouldn't allow me to do a dissertation on what has become my subject of expertise overnight, but Liberty would. Of course, listeners, anybody who knows anything about me would know that this is the subject of religious deconversion. And I've done enough and modeled enough at this point that I think I can easily do a dissertation on it. And it would be a shame if I didn't. So I looked at, I'd prefer to have done this at a secular university, only because that gives it a little bit more street cred than doing a dissertation at a religious university. But the Liberty's the only one I could find that would allow me to. So, and that's fine, as long as all the work I have done hasn't gone to waste. So yeah, I start that this week. It's fun to start reading there because I'm coming from a field of behavioral analysis, and behavioral analysis is notoriously reductionist on human nature. It just sort of strips human nature of free will and treats humans as sort of cause and effect machines along with the rest of the universe. And so it tends to be philosophically problematic, but in terms of technique, it's a standard that allows us to study human behavior at an extraordinarily accurate degree. So I've appreciated that aspect of it, and I have incorporated it into my research a great deal. I bring that up because now I'm going into a PhD for general psychology, and I'm reading the material coming up, and they don't have a flattering view of behavioral psychology. So it's kind of an east side, west side thing between general psychology and behavioral psychology. And I'm switching over to the other side, and I'm getting to see it from the outside. So that's fun.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So yeah, that was fun. So you were talking about me being busy. Well, I just had hand surgery, which has kind of put me out of commission in terms of doing my work, which, as a teacher, I'm having to do online instruction, and you really can't plan lessons or grade papers or do any of that with a bum hand. So I'm restricted to whatever activities I can do with a mouse. And it turns out it's pretty convenient to be able to make and edit videos with a mouse. That's something that can be done without too much left hand action. So yeah, I had never intended to make deconversion studies my thing, much less turn it into a web page and a podcast and a YouTube channel. But that's more or less what I've done. I've turned it into a YouTube channel, and I've been pretty active on that. Think that there wouldn't be much to talk about in that field, but once you really dig into it, it begins to open up a little bit. I'm really happy with the documentary that I put together. You got a chance to see that, correct, Caleb?
Yeah. It was good stuff, very informative, and very well researched. So a lot of information for people in there.
Yeah, and I was, I enjoyed the ability to put it together with stock footage, which is a huge bonus if you ever do YouTubing, is that there's free stock videos that you can find on sites or on YouTube channels. And the people who create the stock videos, they make a decent amount of money because those channels get enough traffic that the commercials alone, pay back whatever they're expending on creating these stock videos. So it's a win-win for everybody. Anyway, that made it for it to look like a more professional documentary versus me just sitting and talking into the camera the whole time. And then I got some volunteer voice artists to read some of the testimonies and documentary information, which makes it sound a little bit more professional. So altogether, I really liked it. The reason, the point behind the documentary was that it conversion research has been around since Freud at the very least. And so, the whole idea, one of the projects that psychology really had to dig into in its early days is, why do people behave religiously? What's the deal with religion? Why do people believe in God? That kind of thing. And in digging into that question, of course, the question arises, how does somebody go from not being religious to being religious? And this is where conversion studies come up. Since that's been going on, most people have more or less assumed that people just kind of had a come to Jesus moment or, a conversion experience and went from being not Christian to being Christian. But what they later on realized is that it's more of a process than it is an instant in time. And so that's when they began conversion modeling. And the idea behind conversion modeling is that we look at stages that a person goes through as they become religious. And the very first major conversion model that hit the market, that's still, when I read conversion research that's current, stuff that came out last week, they still will sometimes reference this model that was put out in the 60s. And so I was telling the story of how that model came to be. And the model came to be by studying a cult. And if you think about it, a cult is a pretty good place to study conversion because they grow rapidly. There are a lot of converts coming in very quickly versus sitting around in a, Baptist church waiting for somebody to go up in an altar call and change their lives, and then interviewing that person and doing the study on their life. So yeah, these researchers went into a cult. They got permission to do that. They interviewed people that converted. They interviewed friends, family, and, former church members of these people that converted. They interviewed people that almost converted and then didn't. And they were able to come up with a really robust model of conversion from that. But cults are interesting just by virtue of being cults. And so,
yeah, I find them that way.
Yeah. So it was, doing the research was fairly easy, only in that all of the material I needed was pulled from the peer-reviewed journal entry that was written to describe this model. So when the researchers described their model, they described the cult that they had gone into. They took testimonies from different people. They profiled different people. So all of the material I needed to make that documentary was in the original paper and then a follow-up paper that had been done several years later. But honestly, Caleb, as I researched the cult, it hit like every point that you've ever talked about on cults. It was like, oh yeah, Caleb's talked to me about that. Oh, I remember that.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I especially enjoyed that part of the video. Going in and hearing the accounts of the type of people who would join this cult was interesting stuff. It'd make for an interesting channel or video series itself. Yeah.
I especially liked the Daisy May from Possum Trot, Arkansas. That she dropped out of school at the age of 12 and she started dating and then she got married at 15. It was like, wow, this lady is a stereotype. I refuse that this person actually existed.
Yeah, it sounded a lot like a movie script in places of describing the characters because they were something.
Yeah.
Speaking of characters being something, tonight we also have this fine gentleman with us.
Hello, Steve.
Hey, it's the Bible guy.
I believe you're muted, Steve.
See, we pulled him up at the most awkward time possible to give him such a great introduction,
Yeah. Yeah, I'm chowing down on a donut over here, so I'm terribly sorry. I wasn't paying very much attention.
Well, it was carrot sticks or celery or something like that.
Well, you see, here's the thing. So I typically eat like keto, carnivore, very, very low carb. But these past couple of weeks have just been a little crazy. So this I'm taking as my wife got me donuts for as a celebratory offering, since I had my last day of full-time employment on Friday. So I'm going full-time self-employed. As of right now, nobody sends me a paycheck. So that's kind of crazy. But we're eating donuts to celebrate. So
Congratulations.
So I should be saying congratulations or condolences?
yes, maybe a little bit of both.
Oh, okay.
But no, it's congratulations for sure. I'm excited about it. It's kind of, at the risk of sounding too new agey, it was kind of a God thing. It's really worked out well. But the plan 5 years ago was that by the time my oldest son turned 5, which of course he was obviously just being born, but by the time he turned 5, I wanted to not be working out of the home. I wanted to be doing my own thing. And I turned in my notice on January 4th, and he turned 5 on January 11th. So it worked out exactly perfectly. Couldn't ask for anything better than that. So I'm excited.
Very cool. And, the perfect time to do that. We were just kind of going around and sharing kind of projects and stuff we have going on. So tell people where to find you. Tell people what you're working on.
Sweet. Yeah, cool. So, that is a crazy thing. So I started my full-time job in 2014. And then in late 20, so that was like February of 2014. And then in like September of 2015, I started my side gig doing basically computer help for people. And that quickly morphed into doing website design, and then pretty much became exclusively website design. But that was like late 2015 that I started that. And then in April of 2017, for some crazy reason, I decided to start a ministry. And I had so I had a blog going then, and then was it October? It was either October or September of that same year, October 17th, I decided to start a podcast. So for the last at least 3, almost 4 years, coming close to 4 years, I've been somehow straddling the line of a business, a full-time job, a ministry, and my family. And to say that has been difficult, although admittedly self-inflicted, self-inflicted for sure, but difficult also. That is an understatement. So this arrangement really, really will help to free up time. Obviously, I will get back like 40 hours a week. Actually, probably more than that if you consider that there were 2 hours of just drive time every day. So I will probably get back more than 40 hours a week to help manage my time better and even be able to put more into ministry and stuff. So I'm hoping that this year is the biggest year ever, even for the ministry. And I have a feeling that it will be. So I'm really excited about that. One of the things I'll mention, just for the sake of maybe providing a little bit of value out of this, rather than just talking about myself, would be the post that I made on Facebook when I actually announced this. I did want to tell people what was going on, but I really wanted to encourage people too about, it's really tempting to think, and again, I speak as a person who has a blog, a podcast. I also have a YouTube channel now. I have all these things. So I speak as one who has those things, but it's really tempting to think that what the world really needs is another one of those. And okay, maybe it does. Maybe it could use a certain other one of those, and that's fine if you feel led to do that. But don't discount just what you might feel as a small thing, being a Christian business owner, right? Or being the best employee that you can possibly be as a Christian in your workplace. Now, I think more than ever, I won't wade into politics here unless somebody else leads us that direction. But I think we can all agree at the very least that we're heading into spiritually interesting times. And I think that frankly, the country could probably use, especially the Christians in the country, could use a spiritual awakening of sorts, given that it may be that some have given allegiances in places where allegiances should not have belonged. And I think that really the Lord is going to do something big this year, but it may not be through what most people think are big things. I think it's going to be potentially we might see, and I think we will see, and I'm saying we should see a surge of Christian art and innovation and entrepreneurship. I mean, we've learned now that, Amazon Web Services can just cut you off whenever you want to, and they are the backbone of the majority of the internet. So if they don't like you, they can cut you off. If YouTube doesn't like you, they can cut you off. If Facebook doesn't like you, they can cut you off, and you go on and on down the line. And so I'm really interested to see more Christian entrepreneurs solving those kinds of problems, not just for Christians, so to speak, but just, being a business owner in the world, solving problems, and having, yourself taking that conservative viewpoint and just, not being a bad person, you know what I mean? And just, doing work that needs to be done in the world, but doing it unto the glory of God. I think that's really the kicker. I'm trying to do that in my own small way. I have not felt bad. There have been times over the past few years where it just got so busy, and these past few weeks, I mean, it's been almost 4:30 a.m. to 12 a.m. seriously, just back to back for the past few weeks, and it's like there's. I lost the train of thought exactly where I was going with that, but because I was just thinking about how grueling it has been the past few weeks. But the point is, I'll just get back to the point. Don't be afraid to put stuff out there. Don't be afraid to start that business. Get that new job, and don't be afraid to stand up for your values, for your beliefs. Create art, create things that the world needs that are just good. The Daily Wire just put out this video. I didn't see it. I wish I had, called Run, Hide, Fight. And it's a TV mature. I mean, it's not, this is not a James Dobson video. Okay. It's a real movie with real, not that there's anything wrong with James Dobson. Don't send me hate mail. I'm just saying it's not that kind of thing. Okay. It's a real movie. There's strong language, there are strong scenes and things like that, but it has conservative values. It has, it teaches, you don't see the kind of the obligatory political correctness scene where the 85-pound girl whoops up on the 270-pound muscle bound dude. I mean, what you see in that, you literally have a scene where this guy is just totally beating up on this girl, and what happens? Her dad comes in and rescues her and takes the, and like, that's reality, right? So like, make things and do things according to reality. Don't say, oh, well, this has to be, this is just for the Christian community. Well, okay, if you want to make something like that, cool, but really just like try to do good things in the world. And I think that's the point I was making, is in a very small way, that's what I've been trying to do with my business to this point, and I hope I can continue to do it. So I would just encourage you along those lines. These are the times that what the world needs the church to be is the church. And the church is involved in the culture, countercultural as the church may be. We are still in the culture, and we have the ability to affect change through regular everyday things. So don't discount those. The worst thing you can do now is hide that. And the very best thing you can do is be the greatest Christian, I mean, frankly, that you possibly can be. The more we imitate Jesus, the more we're like Jesus. And I don't know of a single person, even atheists, like Jesus. So the more you can be like Jesus, I guarantee the better off you are. And we're all going to fail at that every single day. But, I mean, Jesus was a carpenter, right? Even Jesus did just the real basic things in the world. Paul was the tent maker. Even Paul, greatest preacher or whatever you may say, as he was a tent maker. He was doing work in the world. He probably did honest work. He did good work. He wasn't ashamed of who he was. He wasn't ashamed of who he stood for. That's the kind of thing the world needs right now. So step up and do that the best you possibly can.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I'm pretty positive that my influence within my workplace has probably far exceeded in terms of its reach. Even the stuff we do on YouTube, it's those personal relationships that really matter, and you never know what your role is in this whole grand scheme. It's always felt a privilege that God allows us to be a part of His plan.
Yeah, if I can speak to that just for a second, I was listening to some back episodes of. I was just catching up on Stand to Reason podcast. Greg Kokel's show, and he was telling. It's this. He did a pair of episodes where he told kind of his testimony, basically his story about coming to Christ, and basically all of the events that led up to the beginning of Stand to Reason, the organization. And I'll never forget what he was talking about. And I've heard versions of this before, but the way, maybe it's just Greg's personality, I don't know, but the way that he crafted the story was just really powerful to me. But there, at one point, I mean, basically, the move that started his whole foray into becoming a follower of Jesus and eventually leading into the wonderful impact and the wonderful ministry that he has today, started because he was like riding the bus with this girl who he didn't know her from Adam. He'd seen her around or whatever, but he was trying to hit on her. He was trying to pick the girl up, and she wasn't really playing along with that, but she did tell him that she was a Christian, and she did tell him about this place. Apparently it was called the Jesus Christ Light and Powerhouse. And, however the story goes, Hal Lindsey was the teacher there, and all, the rest is history kind of thing. But literally he remembered that person's name, that girl's name. He tried to look her up years later, never could find her. He has never, ever seen that person again, doesn't know anything, about her life to this point or anything. But she just, that one interaction led to basically forming the rest of his life. So it's really tempting when you do the kind of stuff that we do, because each of us have, here we are right now doing the platform thing, right? And each of us have kind of our own little platforms that we do. It's really tempting to say, oh, well, we got to get that silver play button on YouTube before we're actually making a difference. Well, bull hockey, the reality of it is that one conversation can change the course of one person's life, which can in turn change the course of millions of lives, honestly. So never discounting those personal relationships and those personal interactions, as small as they may seem. If you really trust the sovereignty of God, then, it's amazing to see what God can bring out of any situation like that.
Yeah. Every once in a while, people that I didn't even know listen to my podcast, or, complete strangers, or even people on my Facebook friends list will occasionally tell me that they appreciated something they heard on the podcast. And so, I often, and even the things that I've written on my blog, I don't concentrate on the blog so much anymore, because most people will watch a video before they'll read a blog article. But even sharing the writing the blog articles I used to write, just out of the blue one day someone would tell me they appreciated something they read on a blog, or it spoke to them, or something like that. So even if you don't often hear what impact you're making, you could be making an impact that you just don't even know about. So right now, I think we've been posting to YouTube for a few months now, and I think the most views we've gotten a video so far was like 50 or 60. So we're still a small-time YouTube channel, but my podcast at most has gotten over 1,000 listens on an episode. So I'm still trying to figure out how to make it on YouTube, but even though my YouTube videos aren't getting many views right now, I know that there are fairly significant number of people who listen to the podcast. So, that's why I'm still trying to focus on the podcast and top of doing the YouTube videos. But I'm hoping to be able to, make an impact on YouTube also.
And speaking of platforms, Steve, I don't think you ever gave us the name of your ministry and where people can find you right now.
Oh yeah. Okay. So okay, fair enough. So you can find me at steveschramm.com. If you don't know how to spell that, don't blame you. I put together a little link. I think you can get it at is it Enduring Together? Something like that. I think it's enduringtogether.com. It's simpler to remember than Steve Schramm. But any of my stuff you can find at the Bible Nerd. Okay. So the Bible Nerd podcast, Bible Nerd TV on YouTube. And I'm actually thinking about just totally rebranding towards that because I mean, really, who cares who Steve Schramm is anyway? So I'm really thinking of. Well, Joel, I'll tell you, I really appreciate that. That makes one. So I'm thinking, I'm thinking about just kind of letting that rebrand just totally sink its teeth in and changing the website too. But I haven't made that decision final yet. But any of the other places, yeah, find me a Bible Nerd. That's the best place. So.
Yeah.
All right. Good deal. Yeah, we were just you came in a little bit late. We were going around giving our ending spiels early and just kind of an expanded discussion of what's going on too. So
does that mean we're going to do our introduction at the end?
Yes, exactly.
How's that going to work? Oh, wow.
Yeah, especially with us being live, that's a bit of a problem.
You know, as Steve was talking, I just realized that next year the Mentionables will be 5 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, how crazy is that?
It's nuts. It's a long time.
Yeah.
A lot of putting up with you.
Well, as you can see, we have a rotating cast of main characters besides myself. Why do you think that is?
Well,
what could possibly explain that?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's what I've enjoyed about doing this whole thing is community, and even just our interactions we've got to build have been great. And all the listener interaction when it happens, or critic interaction even is fun as well. So yeah, I got to do a lot of that this week over at Question Christianity. We do discussions on issues within the church every other week. And this past week, we discussed some about the national crisis and the events at the Capitol. So we had that kind of discussion over there at Question Christianity. And then we also got to guest on the Skeptics and Seekers podcast. It's got Matthew from the Still Unbelievable show. He was on there with us, and so they just got to grill the Christians. We got questions we weren't prepared for, and got to just have a discussion back and forth. So if people get a chance to check that out too, I enjoyed the discussion. So if you enjoy this kind of thing, I certainly tried. So these guys came with some hard questions, though. So I give them credit. They were more thought out than your typical, well, who made God then?
I've never heard that one before. That sounds really tough.
Yeah. I got to troll Blake Genta with that question once when I walked in on one of his presentations.
Blake who?
Blake Genta.
Oh, okay. Blake. Oh, okay. Yeah. I've never heard his last name pronounced.
Okay.
I assumed it was Gunta.
Okay. Yeah, Blake Goomba. Yeah, I believe he's with Ratio Christie.
Okay. Yeah.
So, Tammy says, "Wow."
Yes,
I'm not sure what that was in regard to, but
it was in regard to the Mentionables turning 5.
Yeah, that's what I believe it was.
Well, thank you, Tammy.
Yeah, she also asks if MySpace is still a thing. That was a very old comment, but I'll go ahead and respond. Yeah, actually, it's still around.
Oh, is it?
Aren't they like focused on music now?
Yes.
Yeah,
They've got to be focused on something because.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
I wanted
definitely seems to be a big music focus now.
Well, you got to keep swimming to stay alive, right?
Yeah.
I received a comment on one of my one of my Facebook posts the other day from an old friend, and I thought it might be interesting. It might be something to share if we don't have too many other things to share. Or maybe it'll spark some further discussion. I'm trying to find it now so I don't misrepresent exactly what he what he said.
I'm not seeing anybody's names on the video screen here. Did it go away?
Oh, let me see. I think it may just be in this setting when I have a banner up. Yeah, they disappear with the banner under this setting. So let me see if I can.
I mean, I think we know who each other is.
Maybe, but do we really?
Yes.
I was thinking about giving myself a cute name, but I decided not to.
Yeah, ever since I started live streaming on YouTube with StreamYard, I decided just to go with my real name and stop doing the silly names.
And that makes me sad.
That way I don't have to. I don't have to remember to change it.
We lived for that every single week.
Yeah,
it's the only reason I showed up.
Oh, sorry to disappoint.
Yeah, it's always a shame when you see people maturing,
right?
Growing up and starting to act like adults.
Yeah.
So I found this comment, and maybe it'll help to give the context. And in this comment, and I don't know, maybe it'll be something we could toss back and forth a little bit. So I wrote a post a while back, and also recorded that post as a podcast episode. And it was about the problem of atheism and atheism and the problem of bad theology. Is the way that I phrased that, and the general gist of what I was getting at there is that you seem to have scenarios where atheists don't really seem that interested, or at least many. When I say, I'm not going to qualify this every time. When I say atheist, I realize not all atheists can be lumped in together, but many that I have spoken with have this sort of issue where they hone in on particular pieces that are beneficial to, and then kind of act as though that is the only option, the only game in town, and therefore it is represented by all of Christianity. And therefore, all of Christianity is absurd on this point. And so one of the
can you repeat just the beginning
when I was.
I think there was a little
was I cutting out?
breakup. Yeah, so if you could repeat just the beginning of that.
Yeah. Like when you say the beginning, like the beginning of me talking at all, is that what you mean?
Your beginning of introducing this issue.
Yeah, I got you. Okay, so what I have found is that there seems to be a problem with atheists espousing bad theology because it's beneficial to their argument. And maybe it's no surprise that atheists, when I say atheists, I'm speaking in broad terms, not atheists, not all atheists are equal, but I'm not going to qualify that every time. Okay. So many atheists seem to, espouse theology that's maybe not so, thought through in order to kind of make their point seem more forceful. And not every atheist is Alex O'Connor, okay, who goes to get a theology degree to learn good theology and still have meaningful disagreement. Most atheists are not interested in studying theology, and we can maybe forgive them for that. At the same time, if you're going to publicly comment on something, maybe think about being thoughtful about it and actually, considering the different points of theology. So that's the general. I'd like to
set up on the point whenever you get a chance.
You'd like to do what?
I'd like to step in on that point when you have a sec.
Go ahead.
All right. So what I've found is that atheists argue against the position that they once held because they tend to believe that the position they held is representative of Christianity as a whole. They might have broad categories in their mind of, say, Protestant and Catholic, and they believe that all Protestants believe whatever it is that they believed when they were in the church. This is one of the I've talked several times about the fact that you see most conversions coming out of a fundamentalist environment. One of the characteristics of fundamentalism is this idea that, is sort of the cellular nature of kind of being cut off from the rest of the Christian community to the point that you believe that what you believe is Christianity, you know. And so what you might be seeing is just straw manning because it's convenient, but you might be seeing some third thing where the reason they're straw manning is this is actually what they believed and it's what they rejected. And they're trying to tell all other Christians they need to reject this because obviously it's fallacious. They wouldn't be arguing it if it wasn't.
Yes.
And so, you know, sometimes what it takes is opening up atheists to realize that there are other Christian worldviews out there, and that, you know, if they're going to engage Christianity, they should have a more circumspect idea of all of the views that Christianity contains.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And having come out of a, you know, pretty darn fundamentalistic background, I can understand what you're saying there. Of course, I mean, I still retain most of the beliefs that I grew up with, even in the face of knowing that other people don't. But certainly, you know, realizing that I don't have the monopoly on truth or on doctrine is that was when I came to realize that was a very, very good day. And I do wish more would realize that. And really, I wish they would realize that before it gets to the point of them becoming basically an atheist fundamentalist, right, on the other end, because now they're just taking those same points. And so whether intentionally or unintentionally, I think a lot of people remain atheists and promote atheism because of bad theology. Again, whether it's their fault or not. And so that was basically the point, you know, that I was making in the post. And so an old friend of mine I used to work with commented, and he said some interesting things that, I mean, he definitely said some things I would agree with. You know, he said, I think a big problem is we as a society can no longer have conversations. We're raised to believe there's no middle ground. If someone disagrees, you know, you should attempt to convert them or whatever. And, you know, and I can agree with some of that. But then, so he said, that's my problem with theology. It's theory and very difficult to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt. And we as a society are consistently moving further away from being able to differentiate opinion and theory from fact in all matters. Now, you know, suffice it to say, I don't think he's necessarily using the technical definition of all those terms, but I think we understand what he means there. And, you know, he said a little bit more, but that was the main point is basically, well, there's all these different options of theology, right? Like why, how could we really ever know that one is right and all the others are, you know, wrong? And I wrote back and I was like, man, I really appreciate you know, the comment. You know, you're right. Most people don't know how to think critically and engage in really meaningful conversations. And that really is a shame. And we need to do a better job. But I thought it was important to point out with regards to theology specifically that, you know, you're not going to try to prove things beyond a shadow of a doubt. That's just an unreasonable standard. And more importantly, what I got into was this idea that because people disagree on theology, that be known or that the right worldview can't be known or ascertained. And he didn't respond to me. He did like the comment, but he didn't respond. And so that, you know, it's all well and good. That's totally fine. But the point that I wanted to make is, you know, it really all comes down to what you do with Jesus. You know, you don't have to have this exhaustive thing where, I mean, you know, I mean, where the day you become a Christian, oh, well, now I believe in young earth creationism and I believe in, you know, I'm a Calvinist, or you know, like all these points of theology that guys like us like to nerd out about and argue back and forth about. Like nobody on one is thinking about this stuff. They're thinking, okay, I just made a decision to follow Jesus and I'm going to go wherever he takes me. And I think it's really important for people because I think there's probably a lot more people like him who are just intimidated by the fact, well, like, how could you ever know? You're researching Christianity and then you're researching, you know, Buddhism and you've got, you know, just Islam and you've got all these different worldviews. And it's like, well, how could I ever investigate them all and know which one is right? And there are multiple ways, as you all know, that we could answer those type of questions. But again, it's all about what do you do with Jesus? And I think that there are two things. I was just thinking about this. This just came to my mind, so I hope I don't forget it. But there are two things I think that can really help um, make that point with people. It all has to do about historically who Jesus was. And the 2 points are many world religions have something to say about Jesus. Many of them do. Most have good things to say about Jesus. And while only one of them regards Jesus as, divine, certainly the Son of God, many of them somehow look up to him in some way. And so it's almost like you can make inroads with people because everybody's interested in who Jesus is. How come not all Christians are interested in Buddha, but all Buddhists are interested in Jesus? I think that's an interesting angle in. Another one that I was talking to my former boss about this a week or two ago, and we got into this. It started with politics. Thankfully, the discussion moved on to Jesus quickly enough because I was done talking politics. So one of the things I mentioned was, it's just interesting how Jesus is really the fulcrum or the hinge of history. That's how Max Lucado put it in his very wordy ways. The hinge of history. It's like all history, like human recorded history that we know of, things changed after Jesus came on the scene. This has been documented by secular historians, by Christian historians, and such the like. And so I think it's with a little bit of conversation, it can be really easy to show people that, look, where you land on the spectrum of religion and theology and the different things you believe, like all of that stuff can be figured out later. What you're going to have to figure out is, what do you do with Jesus? And going and somehow making the conversation, well, all about him and going from there, I think is an important way to help when people have doubts about, the finer points of theology and thinking that we could just never come to a reasonable conclusion about it because it's impossible to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt. Well, that's not the standard. That's an impossible standard, I think. So the question is, what do you do with Jesus?
Yeah,
Thoughts on that?
I think that's really, really critical, and actually brought up something that relates back to our first point that Joe kind of pitched in on, and I wonder how much of it's not related to bad theology around Jesus. How much does that account for the rise in mythicism, for example? And seeing that be something that's actually popular despite the lack of any kind of scholarly support for it. I wonder if it's not that pastors have spent so much time focusing on the mythical, do-good stuff, great personality kind of side of Jesus, rather than looking at him as a historic individual within a period of time. So we give him this kind of Santa backing, if you will, when we spend all the time focusing on the hypothetical or the application and not enough time on looking at the actual history too.
To come in real quick on that, that's the whole question that sparked me getting into apologetics and theology. I've told the story before, but the quick version is, in 2014, at that point, I don't do math live or not live. Okay, so I'm not going to try to do the math, but I've been over a Christian for well over 20 years. In 2014, and I had to ask the question: was this Jesus dude like even real? Did he even exist? Well, and so I asked myself, why did I have to ask that question? And thinking back on it, I grew up in a context that taught me to absolutely love and adore Jesus and to do what Jesus said to do, and to follow, follow the golden rule, and to follow all the other ones, and play nicely with others and all of that. But I never one time remember seeing a discussion or hearing a discussion about the historical Jesus, that kind of terminology, or Jesus as a person in history. there was lots of emphasis about Jesus as the Son of God, which there should have been, rightly so. But Jesus, as like that Jesus being the historical figure of Jesus, is a very, very important point. And I don't remember receiving a day of that sort of training in the local church in over 20 years of being a Christian. So that was a little concerning. And one thing I'll say too, by that time, I had been traveling full time as a musician in a gospel group for 4 years at that point. So I was in a different church every Sunday, all kinds of different churches, and oftentimes there was preaching. And encouragement of some sort, going on. And many of these were even revival events or multiple days of this kind of stuff going on. And so I was trust me, well outside of my comfort zone context of what I was raised in. I got to see the spectrum, honestly, of Christianity, at least in the United States. And I don't remember a day of it. I still had to ask that question. How do I know he was real? Does anybody else think he was? Or is it just, is this just a myth we keep passing along in the name of a good literary figure, So I had to ask that question, and that's a shame.
Yeah, that's true. Clinton, Joel, either of y'all have something stewing over there.
Oh, I've just been playing Galaga this whole time.
Oh, go figure.
Yeah, hold on. Let me pause Doom for a moment.
You're a Christian. You can't play that.
Oh, yeah. I've never been a fan of first-person shooters. Anyway,
you're lost.
I'm a platformer / RPG / puzzle game.
Okay, we get it. You're a nerd.
Intervention right here. Somebody witness that man.
It's the thought that has.
Have you ever lied? Have you ever? have you ever had an adulterous thought in your heart?
Well, what does that make you? Yeah.
No, the thought that that's been going through my mind this whole time is like, why is it that I'm engaging atheists? Like, I've never, prior to engagement with apologetics, I've never, interacted with an atheist. I've never been tempted to deconvert. Atheism is just this thing that, like a boogeyman that's been hovering out there my entire life. They were there and whatever, but I got into apologetics not because of doubts or questions about God or anything like that. I got into it because the intellectual aspect of it appealed to me. Frankly, the happy clappy Jesus is love kind of church stuff never that stuff put me to sleep. But when somebody came up and started talking about apologetics, which was kind of a new thing to me, it was like, this is information, this is data that I can process, this is pieces I can put together and apply to in a logical thought sense versus an emotion sense. And so I was interested in it for that reason. And, engaging with atheists has been a byproduct of that, not, the goal, as it were.
Clinton's still just chilling out.
Well, how about you testify there, Caleb? What got you involved in cults?
Yeah, I don't really have much to contribute at this moment.
All right, I just want to make sure we're giving you the time to speak, just in case. So
I appreciate that.
Well, we've all more or less landed on our specialties at this point in our lives. Caleb's kind of the cult guy, and Steve's kind of the what would you call yourself? You're a Bible nerd. Are you a theology guy? Is that what you do?
I don't know.
Or a scholarship?
A little bit of a little bit of everything. Now I really started out heavily in creation stuff, and then it was heavily in apologetics, and now it's I've kind of, for what it's worth, caught the Michael Heiser bug, and what I'm trying to do is a little bit along, obviously not just teaching divine counsel worldview, but trying to get into into the Bible scholarship more, into getting regular people to actually give a crap about the Bible. That honestly, that's more my goal. And here we go. I'm gonna rant now. So I do,
About time.
here's the reason why I say I don't know is because I really am interested across the spectrum, right? Like I really still love creation stuff personally. I really still love hardcore just apologetic stuff. But the events of the last 4 years that have many Christians potentially placing their allegiances in places where they should not be placing their allegiances. These are problems that ultimately stem from, I think, not having a relationship with the Bible that is healthy. And define what that means. Some people don't read it. Some people read it every day, but they think that every word applies to their direct actions immediately in the moment in 21st century America. And both of those are wrong viewpoints, I think, and most other scholars of the Bible think. And I just can't help but wonder, like, if people just knew how to read the Bible, if people just knew that there was more to the Bible than just what they can get even out of an English translation in church 1 hour on Sunday morning, if more people were into that and really knew their Bible and really cared about this stuff, I think they wouldn't, at least in the numbers that we have seen, they wouldn't be so quick to listen to others' spurious interpretations of Bible passages. And I mean, like seriously, one of the latest things to come out is now there's 150, like this is from, I believe the original source for this is the person whose letter is the one that comes before R, and it is something to the effect of, oh, there's like 157 new books of the Bible or something like that. What? Like, do you like? And if you don't have any clue, I mean, maybe you buy into that stuff. If you don't have any idea about the process that was under, that they undertook in order to, to see the recognition of the canon that we have now. And it's kind of like, at the point that you willy-nilly add 157 books to the Bible, and this is just amazing. Oh my goodness. And lo and behold, they're all about America, and there are all these prophecies. And it's like, oh my gosh, like man, God, and how would God do this? And I'm just like, if we just had an understanding of it, and I'm not trying to place myself on some pedestal.
You need him.
Right. I know. That's what, right. And I'm not, dear Lord, like, I'm not trying to place myself, oh, I'm better than you. That's not the point. The point is, like, the tools are available. Every one of us can get Logos Bible software. I pay $25 a month, and I have more than these, but just if you did nothing but paid for the $25 a month Logos Premier package, the Connect package or whatever, you get close to 400 resources just for that will allow you to actually go dig deeper into the Bible and use their tools to be able to, connect the dots and things like that. And so I think while there are many things I'm interested in, I think my greatest contribution from the direct, ministry angle is to get more people to fall in love with the Bible for what the Bible really is, and not for some characterization of it, not for some, magic, book, and not for incantations, and not for, God being the cosmic life coach, but rather what God intended the Bible to be, and who he intended it for, and how he intended for those people to use it. And if that happens, then maybe ever so slightly, we can begin to see more people relying on Christ instead of on people who claim to be, speaking for him, or claim to be adding to what he taught. We have to get back to him. That's the only way to fix these problems.
If I can comment on that again, it's become extremely apparent to me in recent days that for whatever reason, one of the biggest contributing factors to deconversion is issues people have with the Bible. If you look at, on average, the frequency of complaints coming from people who are going through deconversion or have deconverted, it's problems with the Bible. And if you look at deconverts who come out and are vocal proponents of atheism, the arguments they advance are primarily arguments against the Bible. We did a episode of Mentionables Live not too long ago. I wasn't on it, but it was answering these 10 questions for Christians video that you put out. And if you go through those 10 questions, most of them are, did you know there were more than 66 books in the Bible to be original? How can you be sure that blah, blah, blah? And then this, that, and the other about the Bible. There's this problem with the Bible. There's that problem with the Bible, and so this guy is pounding Christians on Bible problems primarily. And I mean, from a purely researcher standpoint, not stepping into Christians' shoes, the question arises in my mind is, okay, so if I come to the conclusion that the Bible, this book of writings that have been passed down from humans, is flawed, how do I go from that to there is no God? That seems to argue that there is a problem with this book, not that no God exists. And yet the reason that people go from there's problems with the Bible to therefore no God is it's the in religious environment they come out of. They are taught that there is something unique about this book that becomes the stand or fall factor upon which the existence of God is. There is so much absolute confidence has to be placed in the perfection of this document that religion stands or falls on this document. And this document must be pure as milk from beginning to end, without spot or blemish, or the entire thing falls. And with it, God. So, I mean, there has to be some new approach to how we teach people about what the Bible is and how to handle the Bible, because for some reason, this sort of thing has been set up in people's mind that, either Bible or no God, which seems like a bit of an intellectual leap to me.
Yeah, I would say that's definitely more than a little bit of a leap. And, it also bothers me that I think you see these other little things that are problems. And I say little things, but they're really not little things. But I think it all stems from this, partially at least, from this issue, because you've got things that pop up and become popular and highly endorsed, like the Passion Translation. Then you see various movements, people embracing certain teachers or even using certain music without any degree of what kind of theology is behind this. So a lot of these little things, problems with progressive Christianity, the problems with that letter before our group and their theology issues could all be resolved with a healthy knowledge of the scriptures, because it rebuts this stuff if you just know how to study. I'm not saying, and I thought it was interesting, you never said that you wanted to teach people your opinion of the Bible, Steve. It's giving people tools for doing this study. It's not telling them, hey, you have to read it this way. It's no, here are some good study tools. Go find out what it's saying, not based on your feelings or how you may be today, but go find out what it says from a historical perspective and what was it actually saying to people then.
Yeah. I'll say too that I don't know that I would be in the position to do what I'm trying to do if it wasn't for the fact that I spent the first 4 years or so of my foray into this stuff being nerdy enough about the apologetics and about some of the tertiary issues I'm interested in, and even like philosophy and things like that, logic. I don't think I would be nearly as effective in the biblical studies stuff if it wasn't for a knowledge of those things, how to understand, basic logical arguments and to identify logical fallacies, how to understand the importance that philosophy plays. I mean, I grew up in a context where I think they would probably, I can't prove this, but I think they would be of the mindset that all philosophy is bad, right? Like we only need theology, like philosophy is bad. And of course, that
And don't
that
even
itself
start
is a
me on
philosophy.
psychology.
Right. Yeah. Right. Psychology, mental health, those aren't real things, right? Like that's the mindset. And so I really am grateful to the Lord, because even though I'm not spending as much time on some of these actual, things, what I'm trying to do now is take what I have learned from those different fields and apply them to Bible interpretation. And that helps just tremendously, rather than just, whereas most Christians' interaction with the Bible is, I'm going to start day one on my 365-day reading plan, and we're going to read through the Bible in a year. If they do that, that's the extent of it in many cases. And of course, that's not universal, but in many cases, that's the extent. And so what I am at least attempting to do, and I've gone off on a tangent the last one or two episodes of my podcast, but what I'm really trying to do with that is teach through the Bible with an ear towards apologetics, deeper theology, philosophy, things like that. I've never heard anybody really do a verse by verse where they got into those sort of issues. And so I think, that's what I'm trying to do in an almost painstaking way. It's moving slowly, to say the least. Even getting through, a chapter of the Bible is difficult, but it's just interesting because there's so much there. Like, how many times have we read John chapter 1? That's the chapter I'm working through right now in the podcast. Like, how many times have we read that? But I have never one time heard a teacher
Doesn't sound familiar to me.
Yeah, right. Never heard of it before, right? But like, I've never heard a teacher, like, verse by verse, address the things that arise from that, the theology behind that, even some of the terminology and the things that people need to, to be aware of. How is it that we have three gods in one? How are we talking about God, but now we're talking about a human, version of God, so to speak? If you just read that, like, what is that? And so I'm just trying to really slow down and take all these different things that I've learned and help people understand that there's so much more to the Bible than just that surface reading that you're doing to check off your plan. And
may I ask a question about that, Steve?
Absolutely.
So in the book of John, I've begun to suspect that John was writing to an audience that had been affected by Greek philosophy. And it seems as if you see some Platonism sort of creeping into the stuff that he writes in the book. Like, for instance, one of the key verses, I think, to the book of John is when Pilate turns to Jesus and says, "What is truth?"
Yeah.
And that is like the central question of philosophy. And then if you page your way back through the book, Jesus is saying something that he doesn't say in any of the other gospels. He says, "Truly, truly, I say unto you." Whereas other gospels, he might say, "I tell you the truth," blah, blah, blah. For whatever reason, John makes it, does the superfluous, "Truly, truly, I say to you."
That's interesting.
So, it feels as if he's talking to a more of a philosophically grounded audience, and therefore he tailors his material toward the philosophical versus Matthew, for instance, that kind of tailors it towards your classical Judaism and their kind of view of things.
I hadn't thought about that, but given the obvious high Christology of John, that, I don't know, maybe that's kind of interesting to me too, because a lot of those philosophers were, people who espoused polytheism, and some of them espoused, the idea of there being no God. And so along those lines, one of the things I was interested to read about, reading some of the commentaries when I was going through, is I never thought about how other cultures interpreted the idea of the Logos. And it's just something that never occurred to me. But there is lots of thought about this particular idea going back apparently even into some of the very ancient Near Eastern cultures. And so you had this idea of this mysterious logos that was essentially something kind of like the Force, in Star Wars, just this mysterious superintending non-personal force. And so you had this idea among certainly among the Greeks. They had a strong view of this. And then even again, like I said, going back into ancient cultures, they had different ideas of what this meant. But what was totally radical is this idea that the word, the logos, would become flesh. And so when you get to I think it's verse 16, or maybe I think it's verse 16, where like that has such power. It's no longer just like, oh yeah, well, the word became flesh. This guy who was the word, yeah, he became flesh. No, it's like the logos, the word became flesh. Like it hits harder. If you understand the background of how other people saw this would have been just a completely radical view. And if you don't take 3 minutes to read the great work that have been done by some other scholars who have noted the way that other cultures interpreted this, you wouldn't get how radical of a claim this was that John was making over and against the surrounding cultures, and even going back to centuries before and millennia before what some of those cultures would have believed. It was a radical idea. So yeah, I think you're right about that. I have to think about that some more.
I mean, when I go through John, you see so many hints of this. He's talking to Nicodemus, and he talks about, I have told you earthly things, and you have not believed. How could I tell you heavenly things? Which kind of separates out into this sort of Platonic realm, or at least it makes an allusion to sort of a Platonic versus material realm. He might have been putting that into service in more of a reference to Judaism, but it seems like his material is tailored to appeal to his audience. And, the opening of the book, the first chapter of John, seems like an example of that. It seems like John is working, in my mind, and I might be reading into it. It seems like he's working to tie together the threads of, the Grecian culture that is more or less the Hellenistic culture that has taken over the Middle Eastern world at that time with the classic Judaist culture. I love John. He's such a good writer, and you can see these artifacts of his writing throughout his books. If nothing else, I can tell that he's the last guard of the old watch, passing on things to a generation, 3 generations away from Christ at this point. And, as a result, he tends to make his books, emphasize the fact that he is an eyewitness of Jesus. He may be the last eyewitness, but he plays up that eyewitness thing a lot in his epistles as well as the book of John. Several times he'll say, and this is he who bore witness of these things, or, we have seen and touched. And, and then of course he includes the story of Doubting Thomas, because here is a story of a guy who actually touched Jesus and, witnessed him. And then after telling that story, he kind of turns to the audience in the book and says, and these are written that you might believe also. So yeah, I definitely know that he's like the last guard of the eyewitnesses, kind of passing on the material to church 4 generations away from Christ. But given that he is speaking to this sort of mixed Hellenistic and Judeo church at that point, I can see how he may tailor his material to appeal to that as well.
Yeah, I never really thought about. Well, I mean, I thought about it, in a very cursory way, but you brought up a lot of good points about how evidential John makes his writing about Jesus and experiential, being the disciple that Jesus loved and spending almost that more intimate relationship with him, as well as the logical, rational about who he is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I'm gonna have to go back through and look at it from that angle. I haven't heard that before, Joel. I like that. Might have some merit.
I do what I do.
Bada bing, bada bang.
So let's take a hypothetical here, real quick. Let's say that I'm coming out of. We'll say which church will I be coming out of? We'll say I could be coming from a Bethel or an Elevation even. Let's say I'm used to going to church and getting the feel-good sermon. I've read some of my Bible. Maybe every once in a while I flip it open because I know that if I randomly flip it open, it's just going to fall on the right thing I need for the day. So let's say I'm coming from that mindset and I decide to dig in and finally start studying this thing. What would be some of the best resources or what would be, most recommended for getting somebody started on that kind a better study path?
I don't know. I've heard that reading your Bible is the quickest way to become an atheist. So that seems like a bad idea.
That's awesome. Yeah, boy, it's a really tough question. I almost think that somebody would need to read something like Gordon Fee's How to Read the Bible for All It's Worth, or something like that, to because if you're coming out of that mindset, I would love to tell people, oh, just read the Bible, but they've now been indoctrinated into a way of reading the Bible for years now that is not right. I mean, it's just, it's just not how you read it. So you almost need to convince somebody like that to take a resource seriously and read it. That is a guidebook on how to read the Bible. That's almost what you need. Or you could recommend good content that has people, some people like to think it's their idea, right? If they read somebody else's idea of how they should read the Bible, maybe they'll get wise to it and say, well, somebody so-and-so told me how to read the Bible all these years. How do I know they're right? Now we're into relativism or whatever. So you may have a scenario where, I'll be honest. It's like I said, I kind of bit the Heiser bug. What I meant by that is, listening to a couple hundred episodes of his podcast has really shown me there is a lot more here than even I realized there was. And this is after being a nerd, a theology and a Bible nerd for years, on end, and really digging into, the apologetics and the philosophy and all of that stuff. When I actually started getting into the Bible, it was like, holy cow, well, there's quite a bit here. Imagine that. And so listening to just good teachers who are able to extract things from the text and who use good, the foundational, rules of hermeneutics, and who understand, how to actually interpret a text, the way it ought to be interpreted, listening to good teaching and stuff. Is that answering your question at all?
That's ballpark.
Fair enough.
Joel, Clinton, any additional thoughts on that?
The thing that has helped me a great deal in at least in my understanding of Scripture and opening that next step of studying Scripture is to start to ask the question, well, how do the Jewish people view their Scriptures? How would a Jew read this? And what kind of traditions and things do they bring along with this? And so for personal reasons, I have begun, listening to rabbis teach. I'm interested, on my Amazon wish list, I've got a Jewish commentary on the Torah that I'd love to read through, and getting a better idea of how the scripture is taught by the Jews has really helped me to understand, a better way of viewing this, and it allows me to transition to the New Testament as to what the authors of the New Testament were saying when they were speaking to this audience. Who were they talking to, and how is it that they chose to communicate to these people? And so having that understanding, the biggest problem, again, that I'm running across in my research is that the Bible is turning people off to Christianity. At least some people. There is a certain select group of people who have been set up by the way that they've been taught and the environment they've come out of to really reject this religious system based on its scriptures. But it's because we've all been taught to read it as 21st century people, looking at it as we would a textbook or a biography written in the 21st century. And from that perspective, it's very problematic. But once you understand the audience it was being written to and the perspective it was coming from, a lot of those problems disappear. So, yeah, I mean, that is what I'd recommend in scripture study is go back through hundreds of years of Hellenizing and westernizing, I guess, the Bible, and try to see what the original audience and what the original authors were thinking and where they were coming from as they were writing. Because, this is a high context culture, and they were appealing to this. An example of this, I realized the other day that in order to understand the cross, the best Old Testament book to look at would be the Book of Esther, as bizarre as that may seem. And the reason that you had to look back at that is that, I would describe it this way. Imagine that you're a general in the ancient Middle East, and you're leading your army to attack and siege a city. And as you approach the city wall, you see these stakes with the bodies of their enemies impaled upon them. A field full of these stakes with the bodies of the enemies impaled upon them. And this is obviously a warning against the power of the city that you're about to invade. It's essentially a signpost saying this is what happened to the last guys that tried to attack us. And so it's this badge of merit for the city that you're sieging, and it's also a badge of shame for the army that came before and were put up on these stakes. In the book of Esther. In the book of Esther, Mordecai, Haman, I'm sorry. Haman was asked, Haman was asked, what should the king do for the guy that he's proud of? And he said, well, put him in your chariot and have your courtesans escort him and have them shout, this is what the king does to the man that he honors. And as a kid, growing up reading that, I was like, what? What a stupid thing to ask. Ask for some cash, bro. Get yourself a better house. Get yourself fixed up. Not go parading through the street for like 20 minutes. What's the good of that? But then you realize that honor and shame were the currency of the day. And this really comes to play when Haman sets up this stake to impale Mordecai upon, when he wants to propose this thing to the king, because, he could have Mordecai killed any number of ways, but by putting him up on a gallows, he's basically hanging the body of his enemy, the body of the man who humiliated him when he, rode in the chariot and the other guy had to, go in front of him and say, hey, this guy is the guy the king is honoring. Honor and shame, those are the currency of the day. And so the reason that Romans executed people on crosses, hung them up on poles, was a demonstration of their power and a demonstration of the shame of the person that was being impaled. That person dies twice. They die physically and their reputation dies with them. There is a certain honor in being killed in battle. If your widow says that my husband was a soldier and he died in battle, there's a badge of honor with that. But if that widow has to say my husband died and then was impaled upon a pole as a demonstration of the enemy's superiority, that's a badge of shame. And so, once you understand the honor and shame value of it, you really begin to understand what the cross was and what it represented. And why, having a Messiah die upon a cross was the most counterintuitive thing in the world, because, this is a man who dies twice. He dies physically and his reputation dies with him.
Yeah, that's an interesting insight, and I think that brings me to kind of what's key for me. I want to get back to you too, Clinton, but the biggest thing that changed my perspective in reading the Bible before finding Michael Heiser and some of the other scholars I know now was realizing that Jesus was in all of the Old Testament. It just opened up the Old Testament scriptures to me in a way that really helped me to understand what things were getting at more. Now, granted, this is from kind of the other side of things, because this is something that I don't think they necessarily knew when they were writing all these Old Testament books. But the beauty of it after the fact is that we see this typology and these things within Scripture that just connect it all and pull it together in a way that, we often, again, it's one of those things that's often missed in looking at Bible study. And it was finding that added depth that encouraged me to dig in, learn more about the history, find some good scholars to listen to who knew their stuff on this. And it would be my advice, dig into something like typology and look at it. And then just grow from there. Steve already mentioned Michael Heiser. He's great. And then, the teacher that kind of kicked me started into some of this was Chuck Missler, which he's passed away now. And the more I've looked at him, I don't always agree with everything he taught and how far he kind of took his hypothesizing, but he had a passion for the Bible and for giving people insight into the history. So that helped me jumpstart a lot. Clinton?
Yeah.
Any resources or advice you'd give to somebody on the road to better Bible study?
Well, this is, not really my area of specialty. There are some things that after studying Scripture, I've actually come to abandon some views that I held when I was younger. Things like the rapture and things like that. But it's just pretty much what everyone else has said. Just find books that will help you understand better. I've read some of the books by D.A. Carson. He has a book called Exegetical Fallacies, which was good. And it's a very, very simple, not simplistic, but, for someone who's never really looked into the issue, it's a really good starting place. I also have read the Baker Encyclopedia of Christian Apologetics by Norman Geisler, who had some entries on interpretation. And so, as it's not my area of specialization, my recommendations are just kind of echo the others. Just, make sure you find good books that'll help you learn how to interpret Scripture better. And one of the main things is just keep in mind that the Bible is not one book; it's 66 books, and so you have to take into consideration that each of the books are written in different genres. So, taking into consideration the genre of the book you're reading through is important to be able to interpret it correctly. Also,
if I can just come in on that a little bit, maybe a really good recommendation might be to find somebody who would be willing to disciple them. That was another thing that I really took away from Greg's sort of expose that he gave in those 2 episodes of the podcast, was that looking back, I mean, pretty much all of the stories from the time he began his journey in the 70s as a Christian to today have been marked by discipleship, either in that he was in a discipleship group, or that he was discipling others, and now even today that's still what he's doing. And this is actually a really big issue. I've written a little bit about this. Dallas Willard, one of his great works was oh, did I just lose it? Oh, nope, I didn't lose you. Okay, sorry. One of his great works was called The Great Omission, and that was kind of the central thesis of this book, was that what we're missing in this day is great Christian discipleship. I mean, people need to be taught. I mean, so even just recommending a discipleship group, or a discipleship mentor, or lo and behold, in this specific scenario where you're saying this person's coming out and maybe you're giving them recommendations, why don't you be the one to say, I'm going to take you under my wing, so to speak, and I am actually going to disciple you in the faith, and have a Zoom call 1 hour a week, have a meeting, leads, mentor somebody else, the same that you have been taught, commit to faithful men, commit to others. That's straight out of the Bible, 2 Timothy, I think, or 1 Timothy, one of them. And anyway, like commit what you've learned to others. And I'll admit, I mean, that's something that I thought about too. Like, I have, my small group that I'm in at church, but besides that, I don't really have anybody who disciples me, and I don't really disciple anyone else. And I'm like, well, isn't the Great Commission to make disciples? And so am I missing something there? Do I need to be more proactive in that way? I'm teaching others broadly, but that intimate, even 4 or 5 people or less, that intimate way of teaching others what you've learned, and being around others, teaching you what they've learned. I mean, that's how the Christian message originally spread. And that was ultimately, I think, the Great Commission. That was God's plan for the world, is to disciple others. So that's a huge one, I think, is genuine, sound Christian discipleship.
Yeah, I think, again, you're on track there.
Yeah, I think that's a really good recommendation also. And I because that's how they used to do it back in the ancient time of the ancient Jews, is they would have rabbis that would teach the students directly, and we've kind of gotten away from that in the church today. Because back in the time of the disciples in the early church, they were able to protect Scripture and Christianity against error, because they had the disciples around that they could directly interact with and make sure what they're teaching was actually true. That's what the Apostle Paul did, is he would double check what he's preaching with the other disciples to make sure that he's preaching truth. So yeah, I think finding a good Christian to mentor you and disciple you is a good recommendation also.
That raises an interesting question too. I can't recall this ever being mentioned by you in your research, Joel, but did you see anything in any of the case studies that might have dealt with how many of these deconverts had been in kind of a discipling relationship at some point? Or
nothing comes to mind on that. I mean, what I can tell you is that a good many, if not most, of the ones that I profiled in case studies were involved in ministry. And typically what happened is that they would get really super hyped about Jesus as a teenager and the young adulthood. And they decide that this is what they're going to do with their life. And so they change all their plans and go to seminary, or they go to Wycliffe Bible Center and become a missionary overnight, or something like that. And so they get super hyped up about Jesus and sort of, jump both feet into the ministry. And then they tend to burn out. And, as they burn out, they lose that momentum they built up early, and they start asking all of these questions, and then they veer off. So what you find, and this is probably an artifact of the fact that the people that I'm profiling are people that are writing on ex-Christian websites. They're people who have YouTube channels that are talking about their deconversion. They're people who are going on podcasts and being interviewed about their deconversion. In other words, these are very vocal people talking about, hey, I used to be a Christian, I deconverted, rah atheism. And so, the fact that it is this kind of person that I'm listening to probably speaks to why this is a person who was super involved in the church to begin with. If you're going to be kind of a pew warmer and decide this just isn't for you, and you walk out of church through the back door, chances are you're probably not going to write a book about it or get on a podcast or start your own YouTube channel. But if you were a minister and lost your faith, and so much of yourself was invested in your faith, this is where, central to your identity, then there's probably a higher chance that you're going to start a YouTube channel or write a book about it, because it's a much bigger ordeal for you. And so it's probably the fact that they are so vocal and that I'm hearing their testimony that explains why they were in ministry. You get how the connection goes. Mm-hmm. Somebody in ministry is vocal, therefore I hear about it. Therefore, that's what filters through. Now, I say all of that in response to your question because it seems to me as if the people that I'm profiling, specifically these vocal people, didn't necessarily go through a mentorship. They decided to kind of, jump headlong in, and skip that step.
And isn't it interesting though? I was just thinking about this, like when Clinton was talking about the disciples, isn't it really interesting how endemic the language of discipleship is to early Christianity, and yet it's still so absent? I mean, like the particular tradition that I come from talks down on the idea generally of house churches. Like house churches are evil. Well, not evil. Okay, I'm being a little hyperbolic. Okay, but house churches are not God's will for the local New Testament church today, right? The local New Testament church today shows up on Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. Amen. 3 to thrive, baby. In the brick building in God's house. That's God's house. That's where we meet. That's where we gather. Church is essential. Amen. And when I hear that, it gets a lot of amens, but that is not what happened in the early church. The early church was born in a time of tremendous persecution, and they met in their houses. The Bible literally says they went from house to house. Ironically, that verse is used by folks in many of my camp to justify door-to-door soul winning and evangelism, which feel how you want to about door-to-door soul winning and evangelism, but that is taking that verse out of context. The true context for that verse is that they had church in their homes. They had small, intimate gatherings of people. Sometimes those grew larger. Sometimes, they didn't. And there were these small, intimate gatherings. And you have to have church somewhere. The gathering of the saints is essential. But, even 4 or 5 or whatever, maybe less, in a house church is still church. It doesn't have to be the brick building with the steeple. And in the early church, they couldn't have that.
If I may.
Please.
That's a lot of churches around the world still today.
Yeah.
There are many countries out there that aren't real happy about Christianity. And so the Christians are gathering in houses or underground,
Right.
And so it's not a model that has disappeared. America is a unique place in history.
Yes. No, yes, you're exactly right. And that makes it even, even worse. But you're so right. It's like there's this total inconsideration for the fact that there are bazillions of Christians all over the world. The only Christians are not just, Trump flag waving, Americans. Like Christianity extends far. Genuine, legit Christianity extends far beyond that. And how dare we think, that we make it all about ourselves? But the point is that it had to be intimate, right? Based on their context. And who knows, America might be headed for something like that. I don't know. It had to be intimate. You had to have discipleship. You had to have those close relationships. And so to dog them from the pulpit is like totally the opposite of what needs to happen. We need more of the intimate relationships. We need more of we need to make discipleship great again. Dang it. That's what we need to do. Is make discipleship. That's my new book title. I'm starting it this year.
You sure you want to tie your ribbon to that phrase?
Make discipleship great again. But you know, for real,
other people might take your cue on that.
I can't even contain my laughter on that one. That's pretty good. They might take my cue. That's awesome. Anyway,
and our videos banned from YouTube.
Right? Isn't that right? Right.
Yeah. Back then they preached until people were falling asleep and falling out of windows.
That's right. Yeah. Yep. That's exactly right.
Well, I mean, just to sort of expand upon the point that, you and I were talking about with, there's a world outside of America thing is, if you deal with atheists, a lot of the complaints they have and a lot of the accusations they make are against Christianity completely vaporize if you take America out of the picture and realize that Christianity is a worldwide phenomena. It's not unique to America. So when they say that the only reason that the church exists is to make money off of people, let's look at the church in Afghanistan. Let's take a quick jaunt across the globe and see how things are over there. Or people are Christian because it makes them feel, I don't know. I mean, you hear a lot of these generalizations made about why people behave religiously and why people are Christian. And whereas that might hold some weight in the US, if you squint your eyes, look real close, there are Christians outside of the US. And it's a very sort of, I don't know, atheist will atheist.
I mean, it's a fair point, though. I mean, for some folks, Christianity is big business in the United States, but in the rest of the world, it's a death sentence. That's the fact.
That's a sobering thought.
Right. And, you see these aerial shots of Joel Osteen's house and, this is Christianity. That's one guy, bro.
Give me a break.
Yeah. And let's take a quick peek at this pastor in Haiti and look what his house looks like.
Right.
I mean, I can tell you firsthand, there's not very much money in ministry if you're really in ministry. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, Joel Osteen's not even representative of Christians in America.
Right. So true.
So, because I mean, you want to see, the little room that I'm moving into, pay a couple of bucks. Yeah.
Well, even pastors in America, pastors tend to be in the lower income earning groups in the U.S.
You don't say. Yep, it's very true.
Yeah, I think this all points to some major priority issues.
Oh, yeah.
At the individual level, even at the church level.
It's people looking for the next big thing or the next, scratch the next itch they have or whatever. And really, it's, without getting too preachy here, it's, leaving your first love. You know what I mean? It's the Church of Laodicea almost. It's we're reaching for myths and fables and conspiracies and whatnot just to hold on to something or to have some sort of, it's almost Gnosticism of a sort, just to kind of hold on to my secret knowledge and to play my game or whatever. We get our focus everywhere except for on Christ because that's become boring or complacent or whatever. I was telling Tiffany, I was like, if these people, I'm trying not to generalize here, but if people want something, if Christians today want something to latch onto, that is, if they want to blow the whistle on something, if they want to be conspiratorial, if they want to be controversial, if they want to see Jesus win the day, in my opinion, jump on the Heiser train and start learning about the divine council worldview. And I don't know where you guys fall on that, but for me, I'm like, that's way cooler than any American conspiracy theory I could ever possibly think of. Like it made me, that whole thing, I believe, I really do believe there's some serious merit to it. And I mean, to me, that makes Jesus just come across like a total like I don't even know the right word. Like the dude is the bomb.com, like for real. Like this dude is. This is awesome, and he is going to completely. Well, I mean, we've all read the end of the book, right? He wins, but like it's so much more epic if you understand the backstory and the history and the worldview of the biblical writers. I fully believe, and that to me, I'm like, man, that's something. If you want to latch on to something, like latch on to that. To me, that's really cool. So anyway.
Did you just say the bomb.com?
Well, I did, because the other one was going to potentially get into an unseemly language for a Christian to say, and I didn't want to, you know.
Could we not have him back anymore?
Did I just get banned? I think I just got censored.
Well, he's already named himself the Bible nerd, so
That's true. I can get away with nerdy things.
Little on the nose there.
Yeah, for sure. I was grasping for straws there. It was either that or more awkward silence. So I opted for the nerdy way.
Of course, I jest.
Of course.
I'm hoping that phrase comes back from 30 years ago. You know.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I'm the web guy too, right? So it makes double sense. I can get away with it. I'm a nerdy website designer.
a lot of post hoc justification going on here. But
Yes.
Ergo
propter hoc. That's always been my favorite.
Sometimes I commit that fallacy just so I could use that sentence.
Right. Yep.
You see what I just did there? You want to know what that's called?
Go ahead.
Are you not going to tell us?
You just said it.
Oh, okay.
I was riding on your coat trail.
Okay, I misunderstood, but I thought you were going to tell us what that's called, that you make that fallacy just to use that phrase.
Yeah, the psychologist is playing mind games on us now, Clinton. It's not fair. We are outgunned here on that.
Yeah, but
see, sometimes I do post hoc ergo proctor hoc just so I can say post hoc ergo proctor hoc. All right.
You know, the sun always rises after my rooster crows. I'm pretty sure my rooster crowing causes that sun to rise.
You might be onto something there.
Better keep that thing alive.
Yeah,
the whole world is depending on it.
Yeah, but actually, I'm going to be homeschooling my nieces here starting next semester, and one of the things that I get to teach them is Latin.
Nice,
very cool.
Which means I'll also be learning Latin. So
that's cool. I just started learning Hebrew, so I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
I barely have the alphabet down, so
I know shalom.
What's that?
Peace. That's the only Hebrew word I know.
I'm gonna have my wife make me a shirt that says it's got the deuces on it with shalom. See how many see how many get the joke.
Nerd.
Right.
Speaking of which, go to BibleNerdApparel.com and look for that one coming soon.
Yeah, did you know? Did you know that that the Bible actually speaks to whether the husband or wife is supposed to make the coffee?
Yes, we all know that one.
It says quite clearly Hebrews.
The dads here all definitely know that. Are we all dads? Who is Clinton's? We're not.
Yeah.
Oh, I know that.
I count on Clinton to come up with the dad jokes.
Yeah, I have a bunch of dad jokes, but no kids to tell them to. So
what a travesty!
Hey, you're homeschooling your nieces. Sounds like opportunity to me.
That's true.
And that's why you have 2 podcasts.
That's right. Yeah.
do your podcast listeners have to suffer the dad jokes?
I'm the only one here who has 1 podcast. Need to break out of the box here.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah, once in a while I'll throw a pun in the podcast, but yeah.
At least you don't say thebob.com.
See, I get to say things like nerdalicious.
Nerdalicious.
I get to say it. I can make up words. I can do whatever I want to.
How about cringe-erocious?
Cringe-erocious.
Yeah.
That's definitely cringeworthy. That reminds me of that face that Dr. Craig makes often. His little, cringe face when somebody says.
Those are the best. Most people have them if you just wait for the right opportunity to see it, and then you can't unsee it once you see somebody have it once.
Yeah.
So I just saw a picture of Patrick Stewart in a wig, and it looked to me like William Lane Craig to me.
Oh, really?
That's really
Do you have this picture? Should we throw this up for people?
Can we
to see?
screen share that, John? Come on now.
Let me give a second. I'll look for it.
There we go. Patrick Stewart playing William Lane Craig.
Yeah, I made a meme out of that cringeworthy Craig face. I called it the Craig cringe. Cameron Bertuzzi stole it. He said, "What did it say on there?" The caption on the meme was, "Well, you're kind of right, but actually not at all."
No, I got it. Patrick Stewart is William Lane Craig in I Kalam Like I See Him.
I came up with that joke. Dang it!
Did you?
That's funny right there. I don't care who you are.
Man.
That's funny right there.
It's getting way too late, y'all.
Yeah, not for Clinton. Nope.
Yep, only 9 o'clock for me. I have another hour before my brain starts to shut down.
Wow.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you're right. Oh, that was from... He never had... When did he have that hair in Star Trek?
He didn't. This is a test screen for...
Oh.
they wanted his character to have hair originally, and so, they took a shot of him with, in the wig.
Oh,
wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, no, because they showed a picture of him in the Academy and he had hair in the Nemesis movie, but that was actually kind of a breach of canon because he was always established as not having hair back then.
Yep. Well, there you go.
Man, I've never seen Patrick Stewart with hair. That's pretty interesting.
Hey,
Didn't
he
even
owns it.
recognize him at first.
He did have a little bit of that Craig look, though.
He did a little bit. Yeah, I could see it.
First thing that came to my mind when I saw that picture.
Well, you know who else looks like William Lane Craig? Van Halen's David Lee Roth.
I've seen those. Those definitely have some eerie similarities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I think we're about out of steam on the jokes
Well, there we go.
and banter.
There's an idea for the next game we can start playing. Philosopher and theologian lookalikes.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Let me just bring up
It could
something
be
that
good.
came to mind. I think it was Clinton that said that, as you studied the Bible, there were certain things you changed your mind on, and one of them being the rapture. Is that correct?
Yeah, I consider myself now a partial preterist, where I used to be a pre-trib rapturist when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this is something I cut a video on for my Switching Sides channel, new on YouTube.
Yeah.
Plug.
Yeah. Caleb, did you watch that video?
Not yet.
Okay. So rapture anxiety. Rapture anxiety is something, maybe I'll do a whole episode on this, but I'll briefly cover it here. It's something that I ran across in my deconversion research. And, the reason that I ran across it is I listened to, probably hundreds at this point of people who are just kind of interviewing or talking about how they deconverted and what their life was as a Christian. Of course, their lives as Christians aren't very pleasant for various reasons. And one thing that I saw pop up from time to time was rapture anxiety. And this is this idea that, you're teaching these kids in church that there will be a day, unknown day, could be now, how about now, that everybody that they know and love will disappear. And hopefully them as well. So this idea that all Christians will just sort of flash out of existence. And, if you're a Christian, you'll be with them. And then after all that happens, the world is going to be plunged into plagues and misery for 7 years or something like that. So, it builds in some children this, paranoia that suddenly everybody they know and love is going to disappear without them. And then, as if it weren't bad enough to be alone, the world is going to descend into hell and they'll be alone to face that world. And so it becomes this real phobia. And, as a result, what they do is that they're very clingy. They never want to leave or be out of eye line of a family or friend. And they do what I've termed compulsive rededication, where they're constantly saying the sinner's prayer. They'll answer altar calls when they're given. Maybe they'll ask to be baptized several times, but they're constantly questioning their own salvation and trying to do these extra cautionary measures to make sure that if the rapture happens, they're not going to be left behind. So, yeah.
Totally. I mean, I would not consider myself to to what degree you could call that a clinical diagnosis, I don't know, but I would not say that I clinically had something called rapture anxiety, but absolutely growing up in that culture, I mean, that is it is on your mind all the time. I mean, that is a constant. You think about it a lot. It's almost weird looking back on it now. Now you talking about that has me thinking and almost just reflecting on when I used to think about that. I mean, I would literally just have periods of time where I would just sit around and think about the fact that, they're flying the airplane and the one guy is chilling and the other guy is poof, and this could happen at any moment. Right. And then you've got, the images given in the Bible about the two women in the field and this, that, and the other thing. So I don't know, I guess all that to say, yeah, I mean, having grown up in that context, I totally had that thought even now, or had lots of those thoughts. Even now, there are people who, given all the political unrest and things that are going on in our current day, I'm hearing some of this stuff research, and again, from people who are close to me and who I respect and who they could be right about this. I don't actually claim to know strictly, although I have suspicions, but I don't claim to know strictly where I'm at on this right now. But I'm seeing a lot of this claim. It's very common in the fundamentalist circles where I kind of live and breathe, to hear things like there's nothing left prophetically that has to happen. Right, and have my being. Yes, nice Acts 17 reference there. But there's not. The claim is there's nothing prophetically left to happen. That has to happen before Jesus can come, just basically snatch the church away, and so shall we be forever with the Lord, kind of thing. And I'm just like, okay, well, I'm not totally convinced that's true. I have pretty good reasons to think it might not be. But it's a constant thought for people who are taught that view. Just based on my interactions with other Christians, the coming of Christ is thought about almost entirely differently by that crowd of people. The second coming of Christ, that I should say, is thought of almost entirely differently by the rapture crowd as it is by Christians who don't affirm the rapture, at least the pre-tribulation rapture. It's a cultural staple.
I'm glad you said that, Steve. And the reason I'm glad is because prior to talking to you about this, the only people I'd ever heard it from were atheists. And atheists are kind of predisposed to have a negative view of Christianity and Christian life. And so what you find with deconverts is that they kind of go back in their mind and rewrite their personal history through the lens of atheism. And so, to me, it's very difficult to determine how much of what they're describing was true to their experience at the time and how much of it is an atheist reflecting upon religion.
Okay, well, I'm glad you said that. Okay, because that's really interesting, because across the board, I have never heard the rapture preached on. Well, okay, I want to say that. I mean, there. So you definitely have those sermons that are a little bit more hard hitting. left behind series type stuff. God forbid you don't want to be left behind, right? That's the whole idea. Like you want when he comes, you want to be sure you're going with. So you certainly have some of that, but there's also pastors tend to really cling on. They get this language from First Thessalonians 4, and that's where the whole rapture thing comes from. First Thessalonians 4:17 and the surrounding verses. And one of the key points that they'll latch onto there is that this is our hope. The passage sort of ends with comfort one another with these words, right? So there does seem to be, perhaps more than any deconvert would be willing to admit, there does seem to be in these circles a very heavy emphasis on this as a good thing, rather than a negative thing we're going to be missing out on, to the extent that we are going to face this thing alone while the world gets thrown into hell and that sort of thing. When you said that was actually really interesting to me, because while I did have a lot of thoughts about that, they weren't necessarily bad. A lot of them were good. They were, we're getting out of here before the super bad stuff happens. Of course, that's also a very Americanized view of Christianity, which I very much realize, especially now. But
we all know the apostles were pulled away from everything they had to go through.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so it was seen as it is preached on as a very hopeful thing, as a very positive thing. Praise God, we're going to be out of here soon. We don't have to do, this is very much alive and well in the church today. But it does surprise me to hear about it in such a negative way, as you said, that they sort of characterized it, given how it's always been in my circles, which are as fundamentalist as it gets. In my circles, it has always been seen as a very hopeful thing and a very positive thing.
And I'll be your second subject here, Joel, because I experienced some of that as a kid as well. So I can definitely relate. And I agree with Steve. I think it's viewed largely positively, but I can also see how, if I were looking back as a deconvert, sometimes you look on these experiences and emotions in childhood and you already see it as negative. Man, I wish I hadn't been anxious over this, or this was so stupid to be upset over. And so you already kind of see it that way. So looking back, I could see how, especially if my view was, well, this is something people are being indoctrinating their kids with. And, it was forced on me. And this anxiety was forced on me along with it. I can see how someone could view it in such a negative light. So it makes sense from both sides to me.
Yeah. So, it's like you could go back and review your day today, and it could either be the best day ever or the worst day ever, depending on which points you pick out. And so if you only pick out every inconvenient or bad thing that happened, and then relate the narrative of the day using those points, it was a pretty terrible day. But if you only pick out all of the positive things that happened, it would be a great day. And this is how humans selectively edit their history. You can have a no bad, very good, awful day, and you selectively edit it for the bad things that happened.
I thought they did that by digitally removing Donald Trump from Lost in New York, Home Alone 2. Oh, that's a different issue. I'm terribly sorry.
Yeah. Can we stop that? The less time we mention Trump or Trump-related things in this podcast, the better.
Fair enough.
Hey, y'all watch out. Y'all end up in Facebook jail like me, so.
Yeah.
Are you in Facebook jail?
Yeah, I'm in Facebook jail.
Caleb.
That's why you haven't been obsessively watching all the videos I've been making.
Yeah, I can't post in any groups for a week, so I have no idea why. They didn't tell me. They just threw me in jail. Probably I mentioned some letters
of the alphabet that you shouldn't have.
Yeah, and despite the fact that I've been very critical of it, I don't think the Facebook censors care about that. So,
sinner.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, this is the way that humans think. And the same thing happens when a person is converted. as a new Christian, you go back and you look at your personal history from childhood up, and suddenly you can see how God acted in every moment of your life to lead you to this point. And so, it's called a testimony. The religious-y word for it is testimony. The psychological word for it is conversion narrative. But it's the same thing. And in some models of religious conversion, you are considered completely converted once you have a testimony that you can relate consistently. That testimony formation is the final step of the conversion process. But the same occurs when you deconvert. And again, I'm only going in cases of individuals who write blogs and do YouTube videos about their deconversion. So I can only speak to those instances. But yeah, they form a deconversion narrative, and this relates everything that they experienced as a religious person in the most negative light possible. And so these minor experiences that Caleb and Steve have had here in regards of contemplating the rapture could easily be selectively edited to be traumatic experiences. Who knows?
All right. Well, before we wrap up, any final thoughts on anything we've talked about that's just burning and people got to get out there? All right. Well, we did our whole spiel on channels at the beginning. So instead of giving you 30 seconds, I'm giving you 5 seconds. You can pick one website, one address to tell people to go to. That's it. One. Joel.
Yeah, go see my new channel, Switching Sides, on YouTube. Shalom.
Clinton.
Yeah, well, I host a podcast called Pro-Life Thinking, which trains people to make the case for life effectively and persuasively. You can find us on iTunes or Blog Talk Radio.
No, one. You get one. You got the whole thing at the beginning. You get one.
iTunes isn't technically a website. It's an app. It's an app.
Bending the rules.
Finding a loophole.
Objection, Your Honor.
And find us on YouTube.
All right, Steve.
Bible Nerd TV on YouTube.
All right, and
man, you're all making me look bad right now.
Well,
I mean, you took 30 seconds. I took 2.5. Just saying.
That's true.
And Question Christianity on YouTube, just to keep up with that. But since you're already here on the Mentionables, go ahead and subscribe, hit notifications, all that good stuff. We'd love to have you join us in chat next time and be a part of this conversation. Love to hear what you think.
More dad jokes to come.
You can also
absolutely.
leave comments in the comments section, and your favorite mentionable will definitely interact with you.
Mm-hmm. Or your least favorite. That also
yeah.
It may be a more a popular term, actually.
Select the mentionable that you would prefer to interact with.
Right, yeah.
Tag them in the response, and
for
Then
Caleb,
let the insults fly.
for Caleb Johnston, press 1. For Joel Furchis, press 2.
Habla español, el primo dos.
Oh, prima does.
All right. Well, before this gets any worse, I'm going to go ahead and hit the exit music here.
All right.
So enjoyed it with you guys, though.
Yep.
Yep.